Hey, this is Prophet Rob Sanchez. I want to say good morning to you, and I want to jump into the Word, and I want to bring something to you, a little thought out of Genesis chapter 40, starting in verse number 1. It says, "And it came to pass after these things, that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, the place where Joseph was confined." Have you ever been in a place where you felt locked up and you didn't understand why? Joseph had been in prison for some 10 or 11 years at this moment in time. And what is happening is God had a purpose. See, sometimes we don't understand why our life gets put on hold. Sometimes when you have a dream, God has a plan that He's already worked out. We just don't see it. So we got to go through what's called the process. Joseph is in the middle of the process. I find it very amusing that in his most difficult circumstance, feeling forsaken, feeling forgotten, maybe right now you feel that way. Maybe you feel like, I have a lot of unanswered prayers. God, why me? Can you imagine Joseph? Joseph is going through a real difficult place, feeling forsaken, abandoned, rejected. He's an outcast from his own family, sold him into slavery. Lies and accusation put him in this very dungeon that he's dwelling in. Circumstances, some fair, some unfair. In Joseph's case, seemingly unfair, but this is what's so amazing. Joseph had a purpose. Joseph had a dream. Joseph had a promise given by God. So here he is in the midst of this dungeon, and I find it very interesting and humorous that how God ministers to Joseph. He sends him two men, a butler and a baker. What does a butler do? He served wine and filled the cup of the king. Speaks of the new covenant. He had the baker also put into the custody that Joseph was to care after. What does a baker do? He bakes. He bakes bread. So when I look at the scripture, what I see communion. Joseph was in a confined place in a prison. And in that place, what did God do? He sent him bread and wine. Communion. Could it be that God's trying to speak to us today that if you're in a difficult place, if all you have to do is return to communion? Understand that when you partake of His bread, you're partaking of His body. You're taking of not just the sufferings, but the victory that comes after. The new covenant is God's promise, His blood that will redeem you, renew you, transform you. Joseph went from a place of being bound to having and finding freedom in the midst of it. You know what's so amazing? These butler and baker, they both had dreams. Joseph interprets the dreams, and all that he said came to pass. But this is the thing that I want you to hold on to. Maybe you're in a confined place right now because God has a plan for you. When you have communion, what really God's going to do is let you meet the person that's going to become your deliverer. See, when Joseph was dwelling with his family, he was never going to be the leader in Egypt. He was never going to become the one that God destined him to be. So through hardship, through trial, what does God do? He lets him meet the man that was going to connect him to destiny. Without the butler, Joseph would have never met Pharaoh. Yeah, it took 13 years for this all to take place in Joseph's life. But in one moment, when Pharaoh sent for Joseph, his world changed. I'm here to tell you that you might be facing some difficulty, some hardship, and it might seem like your storm is enduring forever. Partake in communion, and when God calls your name, when God calls you out, everything around you is going to suddenly and magnificently change for the glory of God. And who God destined you to be, you will. So don't let no man's opinion steal your dream. Let no frustration keep you from God's promise. Be faithful. Partake of communion. In your strangest, most difficult hour, you know what God will do? He'll call your name. When Joseph was called out, before you knew it, he became a leader of a nation. I'm looking at a bunch of leaders today. I see you called by His name. Do great things. Today, be blessed and know, no matter how difficult your circumstance, your storm, or your season may be, God's setting you up to meet the one that is linked to your destiny. Your trial is really God placing you in a place where you'll meet the one that's connecting you to where He's taking you. So remember, life is not just good, it's very good. Be blessed.